First of all, thanks a lot for choosing me. And I'm Professor Rita Kakkar. I have recently retired from Delhi University, and where I was a senior professor. And at the end of my career, I was also the head of the department and the dean of the Faculty of Science. Let me go back to the beginning. I was born at Lucknow, but my father had a transferable job. He was in the military services. So every 2 years we had to move. So I cannot talk about one school or one place where I grew up. I grew I was born at Lucknow, then we moved over to Bareilly, then to Jhansi, where I started my schooling, and from there back again to Lucknow, then to Meerut, and then finally at Delhi. And the rest of my education was all at Delhi. My 11th class, I passed from Loreto Convent, and BSc honors, MSc, all from the Department of Chemistry, MPhil, PhD, and then finally I was teaching here also. So my longest period of time was in the Department of Chemistry, Delhi University. Now, coming to my schooling and what influences I had, as I said, I started at St. Francis in Jhansi because my father's job was transferable. He made sure that we were not studying in different boards, because one never knew whether we, by chance, we stayed only in UP, but we could have gone to Bombay or somewhere. So he put us in all convent schools. Now, my mother, she was the greatest influence. I think it is there for everybody. She was an educated lady. She would have turned 100 last year, but she was a graduate. At a time when girls used to drop out after 8th or 10th, she was a graduate, and in what subject? In economics. And her biggest regret was that she could not study science. I think that was because her cousin was a doctor, her paternal cousin, and she wanted to be just like her. But because of her family circumstances, both my parents were the eldest in their families, so they had lots of responsibilities. My mother's mother, my nani, she was a diabetic, and she was always unwell. So my mother could not go back. At that time, they used to have science practicals in the second shift. So my mother could not go back for the science practicals. She had to drop science. She started, but she had to leave. And that, I think, was her biggest regret. And she always told me, like my nani also, and she also, they they always felt that they were more worried about my education than even my brothers, because my mother used to say that the responsibility of the children is always on the shoulders of the women. So women should be educated, and if a woman is educated, she'll educate her children also. So my mother, she taught me until third class, all the subjects, and after that also, if I had difficulty in anything like Hindi and all, I had difficulty, she would help me. I remember that after we used to come back from school, I have two brothers, one elder brother who was much elder to me, so he was already in a job when I was small, and a younger brother who is 2 years younger to me. So both of us, she used to make us sit in front of her after we had finished our lunch and rested, and help us with our homework. And I think that helped a lot. My father was good at mathematics, so except mathematics, everything else was taught by my mother, and mathematics my father did. What other influences I had in my life was uh, both my grandfathers. My paternal grandfather, he did not stay with us, but whenever he came, he used he was a nature freak and fitness freak, as they call now. He would make us touch our toes in the morning, wake up early in the morning. He said that education can come later, but you should worry about your health first. He used to take me for nature walks, and on the way he would make me recite tables, talk to me, and we would be talking about flowers and everything, about nature. When he used to come back home, he told my father, make her study science, because she's so inquisitive. She keeps on asking me so many questions that I'm not even able to answer. She should study science or go for IAS. No, I was, I mean, I was too young at that time. I was just 5 or 6 years old. I had not decided on my career. At that point of time, I felt sick. Typhoid was a dreaded disease at that time. For 6 months, I was unwell, couldn't go to school. And I forgot everything that I had learned, my alphabets, my numbers, my tables, everything. Then I went back to school after 6 months, and I remember I got a sixth rank, and I cried and cried. Before that, I was always either the topper or the second rank. Then my father told me, "Look, you did not go to school for 6 months, and even then you have secured this rank. You should not worry. Next year you'll do better." And after that, I think after my second class from Lucknow, we moved to Meerut, and Meerut again was a, it was a different school. You make new friends, you get to know new teachers. It's a new environment, it's a different house. It becomes difficult. Although the syllabus was the same, I remember from Meerut, when we moved to Delhi, I faced a difficulty, because in Meerut they had started on geometry first, and trigonometry they started later. And here in Delhi, they had already done 1 year of trigonometry. Now, trigonometry is something that you cannot understand on your own. It is at that time that I went to my Nanaji, my maternal grandfather, and he was a scholar in the true sense. He was a double MA. One MA I know was in English, the other one I don't know, but it was a humanities subject, probably history, and MLit, which nowadays you call B.Ed. And he was the principal of a college. So he was a true scholar. Besides that, I mean, he had studied only humanities subjects, but he knew everything under the sun. He was a walking encyclopedia. I asked him to help me. My father could not help me with trigonometry. And I remember how he explained to me. He drew triangles, different, isosceles and right angle, and told me just the definition of sine and cos. I was able to remember all my life. Uh, I could not, I never learned, what is sine 30, cos 30, or all that. I always used to draw a triangle and then judge, from Pythagoras' theorem, what is it. That made me learn one thing which helped me in my teaching, that if you teach the concepts, then you don't have to learn anything by heart, because I find it very difficult to learn anything. Rote learning is something that I find difficult. So in my teaching also, I did that. I used to tell the concepts to the students, and they were able to understand them. Years later, when I interviewed them, they remembered everything that I had taught them. It was because I had not taught them to learn anything by heart. If you learn something by heart, you forget the next time you go for another semester. So that was one thing that shaped the way I taught chemistry. Then I think my parents were the greatest influence, obviously. They wanted me to become a doctor. I remember my father, when he used to come back from office, he used to call out doctor. When I went for my um, I passed out from Loreto Convent in Delhi. That was the first batch of students of Loreto Convent. And when I was in ninth class, ninth was the highest class they had. So they did not have any science classrooms at that time, no laboratories. To what they had an understanding with Mount St. Mary's, which is a boys' school, and my brother was there, that the boys from Mount St. Mary's used to come for their humanities class to Loreto Convent, and the girls from Loreto who wanted to pursue science had to go to Mount St. Mary's. So there, in my first biology practical, I just couldn't stand the dissection. I came back home and told my parents that I don't think I can do biology. I have to change my subjects. I cannot take biology because I cannot do dissection. I could not stand the smell of formalin, and I could not just do the dissection. So my parents said, "Don't worry. I mean, we are not forcing you to pursue medicine. Whatever you want to do, you do that." And the nice thing was that the other alternate was that if you do not do biology, you do English literature, and it was a strange combination, but that was the combination that school was offering. And English literature was taught by nuns from the school, and I mean, that was a very pleasurable experience to learn Shakespeare from Irish nuns. And I never regretted that decision. Now, coming to chemistry, I don't think I chose chemistry. Chemistry chose me, in the sense that we had, like I said, our maths class was held in Loreto Convent itself, and we had an excellent teacher. And I my passion was mathematics all the time. Then and we had a good teacher, an excellent teacher for chemistry also in Mount St. Mary's. But what I lacked, I loved maths. I remember that our session used to be from January to December, and December we used to have a 1 month long Christmas break. So from 15th December to 15th January. 15th December to 15th January, we did not have anything to study because that was the end of the session and the new class had not begun. And we used to get all the books for the new session. Remember, I used to finish all the sums at the back of the maths book without even the session starting, because I just used to love maths. So I decided that I will go in for maths honors when I complete my 11th class. Then somebody told me that if you think maths in university is the same as what you have done in school, you are mistaken, because there are a number of theorems that you have to learn by heart. Their proofs. It is not like a few theorems in geometry that you study in school, but here there's a lot of abstract. Then I did the next best thing. I didn't know about computational chemistry at that time, but chemistry was my second love, so I went in for chemistry honors. Now, chemistry honors later on, as it happened, I combined my love for literature, my love for maths and chemistry, and it has been a you know great journey where I have studied all. I have used all my passions, and I'm using them for my research work, and I'm also doing. I'm writing books, which I love doing, and so I'm satisfying all my passions. So then I took admission to the Department of Chemistry. Um that time, even before that, the BSc teaching, the undergraduate teaching used to be held in colleges, but the classes were held in the department. But 2 years before, the undergraduate teaching had shifted to the colleges, but the department retained the top 40 students. I was fortunate to be amongst those 40 students and to be taught by real, experts in the field. I remember at that time, whoever taught us, I felt that this person is an expert in whatever subject he or he is teaching. Most of them were males. And the next time he taught another topic, I thought this is his expertise. So they were experts at teaching. They were experts in whatever field they were pursuing. And I my very first class was held by the head of the department. He taught organic chemistry, which I did not like so much, but he was talking about the applications of chemistry. He was telling how vitamins work, how the everyday chemistry, and that sort of told me that chemistry has so many applications. In fact, later on I realized in the kitchen, if you go, everything is chemistry. So chemistry has a lot of scope beyond that physical scope that you can pursue chemistry for a job or anything. Then I was also fortunate to be taught by the vice chancellor, who was also from chemistry, Professor R.C. Mehrotra, and all the teachers at that time. I felt they were some of the best. And after my graduation, I pursued MSc in the department. In my PG, I took up physical chemistry. Now, physical chemistry, as you know, is partly mathematics, partly physics, partly chemistry. So I got to learn, and that was the time I enjoyed more than my undergraduate classes. I enjoyed the postgraduate classes. I took up two theoretical subjects, spectroscopy and quantum, as my special subjects. I was very impressed by the teachers. One of the teachers whom I later, who became my supervisor for PhD, was Professor N.K. Ray. Um, he was a very tough person to work with. People told me he scolds a lot, do not join him. But in the class, he was excellent. He had the knack of making quantum chemistry is perceived as a very difficult subject. But he had the knack of making it sound so simple. He never lost sight of the molecule. He was not doing only abstract theorems and all. He was telling how you can apply it to chemistry, to molecules, and that is what I continued till now. I'm still working. I'm not, deriving any theorems. I'm not doing um, uh, any strange abstract derivations, working on subatomic particles or anything like that. I'm looking at the molecules and how, what are the chemical interactions that take place, how they take place, and that is fascinating. And I think finally I was, after taking up quantum chemistry, i I really enjoyed chemistry. Now, with quantum chemistry, I decided to do PhD. And I could not understand how anyone, what kind of research was going on in quantum chemistry, but I liked it as a subject, so I joined. And then, since then, I've been pursuing computational chemistry, quantum chemistry. I've been teaching quantum chemistry, spectroscopy. I like spectroscopy more than quantum because it has applications in chemistry. You you can you can observe it. And so my then I pursued MPhil first and then my PhD. And after that, I joined Miranda House. After I had submitted my thesis, I think before I got my PhD, I joined Miranda House as a lecturer. And maybe within 3 years, I was appointed in the Department of Chemistry. And till my retirement, I was there. So that was my journey. I finally found my calling. It was quantum spectroscopy, and that I love teaching those two subjects. I even wrote a book on spectroscopy, which was very well received. Cambridge University Press published it. Now they send me a message that they are going to translate it to different languages, Arabic first, and because there was a lot of demand for it. So that is one satisfaction I got. And I wrote only because I just wanted students to have a book which was simple to understand without any incorrect information. So that was my journey till now. Yes, my father would tell us stories about, his. He was there in World War II. In fact, he was awarded a medal also because of some. He told us because of some shipment that he was able to send in time, which was required during the war. So, and he used to tell us stories about the army. First of all, my father had studied in a European school. Now, European schools at that time, only 2% of Indians, well, that was, my father was born in 1916. So you can imagine it was around 1930 that he must have passed out from his school. He used to tell us about the values that he learned there. Values in the sense discipline. He used to tell us that in the morning they used to line up all the students, and then the teacher used to come and look at the shoes, and he said, I want to see my face in your shoes, it should be polished so well. So that is what he tried us also to learn, although I did not imbibe so much of it as he did. Second thing is he was a very good mathematician. He could do calculations in his head. Arithmetic was something that he could do just in his head. There were no calculators at that time. And I remember that years later, after he had retired, after we were staying in our own house, they were doing some, leasehold to freehold. There were lots of calculations. People would come to him for advice because he could do the calculations faster than the calculator. My mother used to say that I'm somewhat like him. I was, but then over a period of time, I lost that knack that he had for fast calculations. Then the values, my mother was a very honest person, and she always said, she never, whenever I said something which was maybe mildly against somebody, she said, never say that. Don't talk against anyone. You don't know what all they are going through. So that was one thing my mother taught me, and she was a very honest person. The most honest, and uh, if she used to fight for justice. The second thing was that in she told me that my nani, I had never met my nani because she died just before I was born, maybe 5 months before. She died in January and I was born in June. So I never met her, but she used to tell me about her. She said that she was a person who fought for women's rights, she for education of the girl child at that time. I mean, my mother's mother must have been so old. She said she was way ahead of her times, and but my father, of course, used to be in the office most of the time. So, except for although I was more attached to him than to my mother, but my mother instilled all these values in me. My brother also, he's 15 years, he was 15 years older to me, so hardly met him because he was already working somewhere else in a job. And my younger brother and I, we were the ones who grew up together. My brother, he fulfilled my parents' desire to, he became a doctor because he loved biology. It wasn't because anybody forced him to. And he also went on to study a lot. He did his MBBS, then diploma in anesthesia, then masters in surgery, then DM in MCH, that they call, from AIMS. So he also studied a lot. I think we all, even my paternal side, all my cousins and all, they're all either engineers, doctors. They're all, everybody was into education or teaching. I'm actually, he used to recite a lot until people started saying that they are, they were repetitive at a time. Then I do remember one story that he said that earned him the medal. I have that medal because I didn't want it to get lost. So I've kept it in a showcase in my home so that it doesn't get lost anywhere. My mother told me then that there was a shipment that they had to send. The army needed that shipment from wherever they were posted. They were posted at all kinds of non-family stations. At that time, Ranchi was a non-family station. My parents got married in 1947, in May 1947, and then the partition came in. I'll tell you one story about that. The partition came in August. What happened, my mother, after marriage, she was in Bombay because my father was posted there. In Bombay, people didn't know what is happening in the rest of India, in the rest of, in Punjab, what is happening. My Nana ji was in Amritsar. They had a house in Amritsar, so they were in the middle of everything. My mother said she wrote a letter to my Nana ji, and she congratulating कि okay, India has become a, आज़ाद हो गया. She says he got very angry. Here houses are burning right and left, and you are congratulating us. It is a really sad time. And they went through a lot during partition. Her maternal aunt, she killed herself because, rather than getting raped by people. There were lots of stories that she shared at that time. The same thing. My father, like he said that he was a very conscientious person. What I learned from him was discipline. That do your job well. Whether he used to come home at 9 o'clock because there was some pending work, all that I learned from him. The discipline part, the army discipline part, although he was a civilian there, he was in the MES. So, but that discipline part, of course, he instilled in us to sit straight. I remember that if we slouched a little, he would tell us, "No, sit straight. This is not the way children should sit." And my son used to sit straight when he was small. He used to tell his cousins, "Look, this is how you should sit." So all those things we learned. Yeah, and he was very orderly. In fact, I didn't learn many things because he used to take care of my finances, everything until I got married, and all my, um, my bank accounts and everything. He used to take care, and he was very good at all that because he was good at maths. He used to do all that. After that, I found it difficult to do my own work after he became too old to help. Yeah, because you see, people elsewhere did not know. This is what she wanted to tell me, that people elsewhere, people who were living in the south, who were living in Maharashtra or anywhere, they did not know what was happening near the borders. And later on, she learned that my grandfather's house was the only surviving house. All the houses around them were burned, and that time they had very, narrow gullies, as they call, no, lanes and all. And she said that their house became too weak, so there it also had to be pulled down. And I mean, she was trying to tell us that partition was horrible for the people who were staying there. And then she learned about her her what mami ji, who they were returning. They were in Pakistan. Acha, and my mother, she lost all her gifts in marriage. She had given to my mother-in-law and father-in-law, and they were staying in Pakistan only, Pakistan part of. So when they came, everything was lost. She just brought two sarees from there, which she gave to me, and the rest she lost everything. All the silver she had, I think gold probably she had brought, but everything else, she said, she felt bad. And you know what these women did? I learned from about my mother-in-law also. My father-in-law was a proper army officer. So, can I bring that also, because it didn't shape my future, but it comes into the story because my father-in-law was in the army, so he was entitled to come back from there, from the Pakistan part by air. But because his family was there, he came back by train and brought a lot of people along with him. He brought his my mother-in-law. They left everything, the belongings, because they said it is more valuable to bring people back than your valuables. But my mother-in-law, I don't know, for whatever reason, she brought her Singer sewing machine. And that, my mother also, she only the only thing that survived was a Singer sewing machine. I don't know, it becomes it is a kind of um, what should I say? Because I just now joined a group of people who own Singer sewing machines. That in 1947 it was a kind of prized belonging. It still is. People treat it as one of the prized belongings. And my father-in-law died 9 years later in 1956. And after that, my mother-in-law looked after her children by sewing clothes on that machine. So I don't know, it is not relevant to chemistry, but what I wanted to tell was that that was a very trying time for people who were staying at that time in that place. And people who were in other parts of India did not realize. That is why she told me this. Okay, people did not realize, even I did not realize. I was very enthusiastic that now India is a free nation. And but my Nanaji was, what I do remember is that he used to tell us that after you finish a class, you bring all your books, your, whether it is a chemistry book or a physics book or a maths book. He was an art scholar, but he would read all of them and ask him physiology, ask him anatomy, anything. He knew everything under the sun because he was an avid reader. So was my mother. She used to read the newspaper from end to end, read storybooks. I think our love for reading came from there. My brother, he used to finish 2, 3 books in a day. So reading came from them. And I think if you are a good reader, you are a good writer also. So I think all these virtues came from them. Maybe not chemistry, but probably she didn't know. They started from scratch, just had this. So I know it was very tough for them, and most of them came to Delhi. But my father, of course, from he was already in Bombay, so there was no question. After that, they had been to non-family stations like Ranchi and all, and they used to tell stories about how they lived there because there was no recreation at that time, no TV, no mobile phone, nothing, and I don't think even radios were there at that time. So they used to have every weekend they used to meet at somebody's place and have dinner there. It used to be like that. But I was not a part of it because I was born much later. So at that time, you see, because I don't know, the feeling he had was that it is still confidential. So he would not share everything about it. What the shipment was all about, he never told us that. But he said it was very essential. So, what I could gather was his juniors were not willing to go to the dockyard to do all this. And then somehow he made them go, and he also stood and supervised throughout the night, and that is what earned him the medal. And in the end, I mean, I feel proud of parents like this because they instilled this kind of values. At least, responsibility, to take your responsibility seriously, came from my father. He always put his work before everything else, and I think that came from him. My mother was a homemaker, but then she was very well versed in everything. She taught me so many things that probably are not related to chemistry, but they do help you in becoming the person you are. She taught me embroidery, crafts, so many other things that probably in my spare time I have so much to do. I don't know, gardening. So now that I have time, I'm finishing my books, and in between, I do some gardening. I try to go back to all my interests that were there, which I used to pursue during the vacations. So, see, in school, I think you don't know much. It is only your teachers who will, if you are inspired by a teacher, you will take that subject. You don't know, that teacher is not going to teach you in your university, but you still, that subject interests you. Our chemistry teacher was very nice. I mean, she was a very good teacher, very tough. She scolded, she used to make some of the boys sit outside the class and so on. But the way she taught chemistry was, especially the practicals. I think practicals are what made me love chemistry. And the Indian school certificate system is not like, you don't have to learn anything by heart. And I enjoyed doing the chemistry paper also, because till then chemistry was perceived as a very boring subject where you have to learn metallurgy, how you the blast furnace, draw it, and all that. But in my final paper, 11th class paper, the metallurgy question was like this. They had drawn the blast furnace, and then they had said, what reaction, write the reaction that takes place here, write the reaction. So you don't have to learn anything by heart. Learn the reaction that takes place when this mixes with this. You don't have to learn it. You just have to write it, balance an equation, which is very interesting. So I started loving chemistry. Probably that question paper made me love chemistry more than the whole of, and the practicals. Practicals, of course, I loved physics also. Physics practicals were even more interesting than chemistry practicals. But I'm averse to learning anything by heart. I keep on telling this again and again because I find it very difficult to mug up things, and this was what uh, in Indian school certificate it wasn't like that at all. It was, and even the English literature paper I've still preserved it because it had, we had books like Midsummer Night's Dream, we had To Kill a Mockingbird, and Keats, Shelley, all of those. And years later, my mother used to teach me English because she was good at it. Years later, she remembered all the poems we had learned and we had forgotten. She would quote them to her grandchildren. My son, when he went there, take the road less trodden, like that, she would quote from there. I've forgotten all those, but she would remember them when she was 90. So chemistry, like I said, after even before I had finished my PhD, before I had defended my viva, I was selected in Miranda House, which is a girls' college. I enjoyed those 3 years there because I had lots of friends, and it was a girls' college. And that time, the entire faculty were women, and no question of any favoritism or anything against you. So that was a nice time. But then I got selected in the department, and I think the beginning 3 years and last 3 years were pretty tough for me. The first 3 years was tough because it was an entirely different situation. There in Miranda House, I had lots of friends. Whenever you needed to talk to anyone, whenever you needed to go to the canteen, there was already always somebody available to go. Here, I did not have any friends. Nobody spoke to me because I don't know. There is always this feeling that if a girl is selected, I was only 25 years old. If a girl is selected, it is because of some favoritism or something. And the head of the department happened to be my supervisor. So it was sure nobody spoke to me. And here it was, dog eats dog world because there were promotions in colleges at that time. There were no promotions, at least no open posts. So if you got a promotion, it was only after completing so many years, so nobody was competing with you. Here it was like this, that because of promotions, because everything, it was a dog eats dog world. And actually, I never cared also because in fact, I had a lien with Miranda House for 2 years. And all those 2 years, I used to come home and tell my mom, Ki, I have to eat alone, lunch alone. I don't like it. I'm not able to speak to anyone. I'll go back to Miranda House. She was the one who used to tell me, nahi, you can't go from a better place to a worse place. So you should stay here only. And I stayed. Ultimately, when I became a professor, she said, "Didn't I tell you to stay here?" So anyway, so the first they would not let me take a research scholar also for the first 2 3 years. I'm there is a rule, but that was implemented for me, not for the others. So I was not able to take a research scholar. So it was just taking class and going, and sitting from morning to evening. Because if you went home early, they would say she's a girl, so she's going home early. One of the colleagues told me that somebody told him, no, she goes home at 4 o'clock. I had nothing to do because I didn't have, I mean, after class, there was no research I could do, no research scholar that I was allowed to take for the first 1 or 2 years. So he said, but she's the one who comes at 8 o'clock and everybody else comes at 11. So she's spending as much time as the others. So what is your problem? He said, "Nahi, nahi, you should stay till 6 o'clock. The others stay till 6 o'clock." So that kind of situation was there all the time. Plus, I found weird things written on my room, door and all that I had to wipe off in the morning. So people were all under the impression that I got because of some not looking at my record. I was a topper throughout, and I was even at Miranda House where it was only teaching. I was still doing some research. I would go to the computer center from there and do some research, but nobody would look at that. So whoever was not selected had some grouse that how is she selected. Anyway, slowly things improved. When the head changed, then this new head, he tried to help me. He could not help me with my work is all theoretical. To get me a computer, that didn't matter. I bought my own computer. I bought my own software. My husband helped me. He was always very very helpful. So he bought me a computer. We bought I remember one anecdote, if I can call that. There was this Gaussian software that I needed very badly, and it cost 35,000 at that time. That was somewhere, uh, when my salary must have been 3 4 thousand or something. So, and there was these diamond earrings also, which cost 35,000. And my birthday was coming, so my husband asked, "What do you want, Gaussian or these diamond earrings?" Before I could answer, my 7-year-old son said, "Mama, tu Gaussian hi kahegi. She she will prefer that." So my husband bought me the software, and then later on, and that is coming in my, I'm still using that software. Of course, upgraded it so many times, and then of course, he bought me the diamond earrings the next time whenever there was some occasion. But I'm just telling you, I never cared what people thought about me or did anything. For years, it didn't matter because I loved my teaching, I loved my research. Once I started getting students, and then, okay, the about my career, at the end, I had guided 50 students, I think, which is probably one of records. And out of which maybe 40 were girls. And I've published 198 papers, so nearing 200. I'm still publishing because sometimes somebody needs help with the computational part. I do that. My own students, their work which was pending. I think this COVID also created a problem because the students could not complete their work, so it still continues. I'm still doing work. I still publish about one paper in 2 months or a month, and just to so that I feel I'm alive if I'm still going on publishing, and I enjoy it. And meanwhile, I've started work on my book again, which I had shelved during lockdown. From Royal Society, they told me either write a book on. We liked your book on. Spectroscopy. So either write a book on quantum or you write on computational. I said I'm teaching quantum, so I'll start with quantum. But then all this came. My administration came, COVID came, everything I could not complete. Now I'm completing it. So, and the last 3 years also, last 3 4 years were also like that. When my turn for headship came, this is where it's a man's world. So the letter was signed that I would be the next head. Somehow somebody got it changed, became the head, and so I got only 10 months just before my retirement, and that was a COVID period, so I couldn't do much. And anyway, that I don't want to be cribbing about anything. On the whole, it was satisfying. In the end, I was the head. I was also the dean of the faculty, and these are feats only two women till now in 100-year history of Delhi University have attained. um, I remember on the last day of my headship, I shared a picture of that is on the wall of the heads room. It has the pictures of all the heads. And my husband's niece, she said, "You are only the second woman who became head." I said, "Yes, there was only one lady before that, and that lady was." See, our department was different from the other science departments because when I joined, there were already two women there. Because one of our heads was a very forward kind of person. He had appointed two women, but they were my teachers. They could not be friends. They were 25 years older to me. They were my teachers. They were nice. But one of those told me there are two options you have. Either become over friendly with everyone, they'll label you as a flirt, and if you're not friendly with them, they'll say you are a snob. I said, I don't care what they do. I love my teaching. I love my research. I'll continue doing that. But, things have been said. Even when I became a professor and somebody who joined later who could not be senior to me, I became senior to him. That is why I finally became head and all. They said all sorts of things that the selection committee had a womanizer, and that kind of things will keep on happening with all the women. If you attain something, it is not because of your merit, it is because some womanizer has helped you. So I have never cared. And other challenges were more, which I don't think is a challenge. After I was married, then my son was born quite late. But then it was difficult to, I mean, I had to balance home and work. And I think I did that to perfection because I looked after my son very well. He's doing very well. I'm proud of him. And he was a very sweet child. He used to go to sleep at 10 o'clock and wake up at 6. So that time was when I used to prepare for my lectures, look at all the papers that I had to check for my student, do all my work. And my husband also at that time was working at Bhiwadi. So every day it used to take him 4 hours to go and 4 hours to come back. He used to come home at 12. So that 10 to 12 period while I was waiting for my husband, I would do all my work. So I mean that I think all women face work life balance. And I think I managed that because my son turned out to be good. And so I don't think I Yeah. So when I became head and dean of the faculty, I thought this is the time that I can make a difference. Although that was COVID time, I could not do much. One thing that I did was that one I'll tell one that I did and one that I proposed doing, but which never fructified ultimately. One was that I found that two of my colleagues, there are very few women even now, when I retired, there were five. I don't know if they have appointed how many they have appointed now. Now I don't keep in touch because I don't know how many are there. But when I retired, there were four other women. Two, uh, two of them did not have a proper lab or sitting space. I overheard someone saying that one lady, she doesn't have her room. On one side, there was a window which had been taken over, the corridor had been taken over by somebody, so she can't even open that window. And another lady did not have a lab, proper lab. She was sharing it with somebody, and an organic lab you cannot share with anybody because there are solvents, and the other lab was, with a physical chemist. So I allotted a lab to her, which was vacant, which had been lying vacant for 4 years, but it was in a prime location. Why shouldn't she get it? I allotted it to her. And besides that, I allotted space to other people also, men also, who needed space. I allotted to them. But there was a hue and cry about the space allotted to the women alone. They were being, after I left, they were being forced to vacate that space only for the women. No, and then I think I was forced to share because I had gone around all the labs and seen how much space everybody has. I shared that with everybody, the map, how many rooms everybody had, and how this lady was just sharing half a lab with somebody, and then I gave her a full lab, and that they complained against me to the registrar of the university, why is she allotting space and all. The second thing I wanted to do was a washroom is a great problem in our department. When I was a student, out of 40 girls who were in BSc, 40 students who were in BSc, we were only about 7 8 girls. So one washroom in one building, one girls washroom on the ground floor and one on the first floor was sufficient. The first floor one was locked by two lady teachers. They were the two lady teachers, they were sharing a room, they had locked it up. So we also had to stand in queue to visit the washroom. And everywhere else there was a single washroom for the girls. But over a period of time, there was a time when 90% of the students were girls, and in MSc. And later on, now it is again, I think, 50-50. But at that time, it used to be terrible, seeing all the girls standing in queue waiting to go to the washroom. And the first floor washroom was open because those two ladies had retired. And I felt that the girls, they need a washroom, a proper place to sit. There's no girls' common room. So when I allotted space, I also allotted one room, and there was a washroom attached to it. I said this should be for a girls' common room because they're sitting all around, sitting on benches, eating food. We also had the same difficulty. We used to go to the terrace to have lunch. So they need a place where they can sit, have lunch, and girls need special washrooms. So I wrote to the next head that please implement this, give this space to girls as a washroom. And this was a proposal which had been there since a long time. It was not done at all. It has not been done till now. This is something I feel I should have done, but it was that time it was COVID time, and the engineering department, was not ready to do anything at that time. That is one regret I have. If I had allotted some space for the girls, that would have helped. But I'll tell you another thing. My room had an attached bath, and I don't know how much I had to struggle to get it. My sitting room that was allotted to me, it used to belong to one very senior head of the department. Finally, it came to me after a lot of struggle. There were many people wanting it, but then finally it was given to me. Before I retired, I wanted to give it to a lady, but it was not vacated because I was still there. I did not. Now I heard it's been allotted to a male, and there are two ladies on that floor. So they said, okay, make it open from the outside so that we can use. I mean, along with the students, they are standing in queue outside. So it is really shameful. He said, "You can share with me." This is what somebody told me. I'm not there, so I don't know. But one lady teacher, she told me, "Okay, do you know what they said?" They said, and men have locked up washrooms when there are plenty for them, and women don't have. They have to stand in queue along with the girls. This is shameful. You know, success is if you're happy with whatever you are doing. I think that is success. It's all in the mind. If you are happy with failure, is the it should not let you bring it down. You should continue striving for success. I think we learn a lot from our research. You know, you think that you will get some result and you get something else, and then you learn from that failure and you do something that works. So that is, and I always quote from Thomas Edison that at least I learned that there are 10,000 ways you can't make the electric bulb from my failures. Uh, Social impact, if you mean, I do get lots of mails from young girls, who are in school, 10th class, 11th class, and their mails like, tell us how we can become like you. So I think that is an impact, that we came across your this thing. We want to be a professor like you. How can we begin? So I said first, you know, study properly your 10th class, 12th class, and then it's a long way, but then it is very satisfying because one impact that a teaching profession can do is you can mentor young brains. You can make them come to science, come to chemistry, and that is something that I think this teaching profession has given me, that I've been able to motivate so many girls to continue chemistry, not to go in for some other field. They've all my students, I think out of these 40, most of them are either teaching in colleges or are scientists somewhere. They're all doing well in whatever they chose. So I think that mentorship is there, is a positive impact that we can make. We have that ability to make. See, like Mahatma Gandhi said, that be the change you want to see in the world. No? So one has to set an example. I remember that I was also looking after two hostels. One hostel of 650 girls, the largest hostel in the university. So I remember the staff, they used to use a paper once and then just throw it away. So I taught them. I told them that you cannot throw it away. You can print on both sides of the paper. And why print at all? You send me whatever draft you've made. I'll correct it, send it back to you, and then just do the final draft. That is one practice that I stopped. That making a draft and then sending it to me and all. Same with my PhD students. Whenever they send a paper, I tell them to send me a soft copy. I correct it there and then instead of getting a printout and making marks and telling them that itself. Many teachers, they tell me they get three printouts. So if it is a 200-page thesis, that means 600 pages wasted. It's really very very bad. So when I was doing my PhD, there was no other way because we had those IBM 360 computer, and the printout had to come. They were not interactive computers at that time, so we used to get a printout on A3 sheets, and on the back side, once we had finished with them, we used to cut them in half, make them into A4 sheets, and then use them for a rough work instead of buying notebooks. So paper is one thing. At home, the what in the hostel also, in the previous hostel where I was the provost of that hostel also. There was drinking water problem, so I got an RO plant installed. Now there was a lot of wastage of water. So first it was going into the garden and then it was getting all mushy and all the garden. So before I left, I made a pit, and that water was used for irrigation of the garden. Even at home, when we wash dals, vegetables, and all, I use that water for watering the plants. And I learned many things from my mother, that in the winter we used to stay in Lucknow, and Lucknow had terrible winters. So after she had finished cooking, the tawa used to be still hot. Instead of warming water again, she used to put a pot of water on the tawa, and it used to get warm when we wanted to drink it. She never wasted. Both my parents, when they were very careful, never wasted, switched off the lights whenever I think that those are values that they instilled. Switched off, they did not know anything. That sustainability was not a word then. I mean, nowadays when I think about it, I think, okay, they were worried about this. Switch off lights when you leave a room, then do not have unnecessary lights. Use natural light whenever you can. And now, like, I'm alone at home. Only this room has lights. Everything else I switch off. The staircase lights, everything I switched off when I'm alone at home. When my husband comes, he switches on everything. But then, I mean, this is what I learned from my parents, that you should not waste electricity, not waste water, and I mean, for sustainable living. Also, teachers. Sorry, actually, children teach us also, because they learn in school and then they start practicing at home, and you also say, okay, okay, this is right. Remember, my son had a fruity when he was 3, 4 years old, and all along the market he was just clutching it in his hand until he found a dustbin. Never threw it, outside. Then he went to Singapore. So I said, do people throw waste in Singapore like that? He said there are no people there. So, and he was very good at he's software engineer. Girls only. The thing is, one should not get uh, disheartened by failures, because and people being against you, it doesn't matter at all. It just shows their upbringing, it doesn't show yours. If you have set your mind to do something, just go ahead and do it. If there's a failure, don't, no matter, you can do something else. I mean, you can do it in a different way, but achieve whatever success you want in life. And if there are more women out there, I'm sure more girls will follow, because they will be impressed by your achievements. I'm sure many girls, I mean, girls have, I mean, when you look at ISRO, they were all women who did, है ना, who took us to the moon. है ना? Yeah, I think I'm fairly satisfied with whatever I've done. Um, but maybe I could have been more aggressive. I was a little, in the beginning, I was not aggressive at all. I accepted whatever was hurled at me. Later on, when I became senior, when people started listening to me, I was I used to stay aloof. I just did my work, huh? But I'm happy with myself. Not Music, of course, is a passion. My mother had learned the harmonium and all. I made my son also learn, and he also enjoyed it. I also learned with him, but then I've not pursued it, because I used to enjoy learning with him, but alone I'm not doing that. I'm doing gardening. I have a yes, and sustainability. I have planted so many trees. There are two places where I'm planting trees. One, I have a farmhouse where I've planted at least 50, no, 100 fruit trees. Then I told this to someone, and he said the best thing to plant is fruit trees, because otherwise, where do the birds and squirrels and all get their food? So I have done that. That is for sustainability. I think I've done a lot. I plant trees wherever I can, and fruit trees. I love them. In the house that I live in, there are 3 mango trees. In fact, we had this is also on military lease, and we had to sign an undertaking that we'll not cut any of the trees. The army made sure that nobody cuts these trees. I'm not a very active person, actually. I'm not a very active person, so I don't think I would have. I do get opportunities wherever uh, whenever we go, but I'm not an active person. I'm not like my grandfather. I used to shirk the PT classes, hide somewhere, because I was never active. So probably, I mean, what I'm aiming now is that maybe a world tour. I'm I'm waiting for my visa to US to visit my son, and we are planning to visit Europe and so on when we are there. Yeah, my mantra is, which I put it down because you had said this. It is, I think this is what I've followed all my life: embrace knowledge, empower minds, and leave a legacy of inspiration. See, why I'm writing books is because somebody told me, and I read this also, that if you ask where the maximum knowledge is, it is in the graveyard, because just people take it away. So he advised me, write about your journey in the university, write about whatever has happened to you, and that should be. And today, just now, I was just, while I was waiting for this, there was quotation by Sandra Bullock. I think that should fit into what we are talking about. She said the most beautiful woman in the world is the one who protects and supports other women. It seems she had a very frustrating childhood. So it's a nice quotation. I mean, you should try to. I felt that there's no woman going to be head of the department, or maybe even dean of the faculty in the near future. So I should do whatever I can to help them.